Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn session. And we're focusing today on enhancing student feedback with Moodle scales and accompanying descriptions. My name is Michelle Stewart-McKoy, and I am from the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning here on the UWI campus. Today, we're going to look a little beyond the numerical grading that we're accustomed to providing more meaningful feedback to our students using Moodle's scales. And so, as you may know, we are using an upgraded version of Moodle. And so we're still exploring and figuring out what the different aspects and elements and features are. And so we're looking at Moodle scales and how we can use it to enhance our students' teaching and learning experiences by providing them with qualitative feedback. All right. So in this particular Lunch and Learn, we're looking at a few things. So we're looking at identifying scales and determining why they would be valuable to us. We are going to be looking at how we can create our custom scales and tailor it to our specific courses. We will then discuss how effective our descriptions can be. So we look at how we'll write them, and then we will practice applying these skills to different activities on the Moodle platform. And so we should, by the time we're finished, we should have a practical set of skills that we can use with our next set of activities that we may assign to our students. Now, one of the first questions we would ask is, what exactly is a Moodle scale? So let us just start with the basics. When we talk about Moodle scales, we're talking about that qualitative assessment tool that provides us with an alternative to traditional numerical grading. So rather than assigning points or percentages, what scales do is that they allow us to evaluate students' work by using a determined set, a predefined set of terms arranged in a specific order. So these could be simple, like needs improvements, satisfactory, good, excellent, or they could be more sophisticated depending on our learning outcomes. Then, of course, when we think about scales, there are two types that we find on the Moodle platform. We have those which are referred to as standard scales. So these are the ones that are predefined and are set in Moodle. And then you have custom scales. These are the ones that we create. And so with scales, we can apply them to just about any activity in the Moodle. Assignments, forum, glossaries, workshop, just about any activity that you can think of. All right, so that's essentially what Moodle scales are. And then the next question that you may ask is, why should we use scales? You might be wondering, the scales thing, I am so used to giving students a numerical figure. Why on earth should I use scales? But if you think about it, there are several reasons why you might want to use scales. They're ideal for large classes. So you can use them with any size class, but they're ideal for very large classes. Beyond that, they provide students with more meaningful feedback than numbers alone can capture. So a student is able to tell exactly what proficient means as against what 78% means. So that's one of the first things. The other thing is that skills tend to shift the focus from point accumulation to qualitative aspects of performance. So it encourages students to concentrate on developing skills rather than merely collecting points. The third thing why we should think about using scales is that they support competency-based assessment. So this has to do with us directly indicating to students what they have achieved as it relates to particular skills or competencies or proficiencies. And then we can use scales to enable consistent feedback language right across different activities in the course. So we reinforce key concepts and expectations using consistent feedback language. And then, of course, there is the empirical documentation aspect. Research suggests that a qualitative feedback strategy can reduce grade anxiety while increasing students' focus on actual learning. So there are a number of reasons why we are encouraged to use scales and not just putting 13 out of 20, you know. And then, of course, we are using different tenets of the Moodle platform. So we are trying to also explore and capitalize on what the platform has to offer. Now, I did mention that there are two different types of scale in Moodle. So you have the standard scale, and the version that we're using has 5 standards. And we'll take a quick look at them when we're going to create our scales. So they have separate and connected ways of knowing. So this is a scale that is applied to learning theory about different approaches to knowledge. And then there is one, I remember there's one for Spanish that talks about deficiente, regular, excelente. So you can use that to see, I suspect, to speak to oral proficiency. And then there is the default competence scale, which basically looks at the student being not yet competent and competent. So we'll take a closer look in a few. But where the beauty lies is in creating custom scales. So when we create custom scales, we can set them for specific courses, or we can zoom in particular assignments or activities. We can set our custom scales to be applicable at the program level or at the institutional level if we want to do that. And it is important to note that while we're talking about scales and their potential, they do have some technical limitations. So whether standard or custom, the scale must have a minimum of 2 values. So it must have at least 2 values. There's no such thing of just having one value, you know. And the max you technically speaking, you can have a maximum ceiling of 100 values, but that doesn't help us when we think about teaching and learning, because it means that we would have too many values. It would be hard to distinguish between the values and so forth. So the experts tend to tell you, well, research and practice tell you that anything between 3 and 5 values is quite good for teaching and learning purposes. All right, if we have too many scales, it can become confusing for both students and for us as facilitators. So in this particular session, we're going to be looking at our scales being somewhere between 3 and 5 values. All right. Okay, so now we know that there are 2 types. We have the standard and we have the custom. Let us look at the makeup of a scale. So the Moodle scale has different components that work together to create this effective feedback tool. Okay, so when you think about it, there is a name. So there's a scale name, and this identifies the name of the, well, it identifies the scale. It should have something that is descriptive and something that indicates the purpose. So something like critical thinking, evaluation, research paper, something like that. The scale name is visible to both the instructors and the students in the course. So the scale name, and well, I usually use my course, Game-Based Learning in the Caribbean. It's a fictitious course. And so for my course, Game-Based Learning in the Caribbean, for my particular scale, for whichever activity I'm setting it up for, I may call it my Caribbean Game-Based Design Effectiveness, right? And I don't think we need to add scale to that, because we're talking about scale. So the second thing is the scale values. And this is usually a list of terms used for the assessment. So remember, we can have between 2 and 100, but we're looking at between 3 and 5 for pedagogical purposes. We enter the scale value from lowest to highest, and we usually separate them with a comma. And so if you think about the game-based learning course, my values or my scale values would be emerging, developing, proficient, exemplary, right? And then my scale description. Now the scale description details what the scale measures. All right. It is not it's not mandatory, so it's usually optional, but we encourage you to include this so that when other facilitators are going through, they have access to that. It provides a context for the scale, purpose, and use. Okay, it is not visible to students. So students don't see the description unless, of course, we're going to share it with them manually. So for this course that I'm doing and this particular activity, I could have something like the scale evaluates students' ability to design educational games that are applicable to the Caribbean or something like that. And then we need to, although this is not so much a part of the anatomy, it is something that we need to consider whether or not we're using a custom or a standard scale. So the standard scale, these are the ones that are predefined. So they're already set up in Moodle and you can simply select it. The custom scales are the ones that we create. And in gray here, I have two components which are not a part of the anatomy, but which are closely associated with it. So we have what we call the usage settings, and this is where we look at the different activities where the scale can be applied. We also think about whether or not we're making it visible for the students and what will be reflected in the grade book. And so what will be reflected in the grade book is shown here in the conversion information. So this is where if we have set up our grade book, it means that what shows in the grade book would be the numerical equivalent. So yes, we're giving students qualitative feedback, but there is a quantitative equivalent on the side. And the system does that kind of calculations. We don't do the calculation. And of course, it has to do with the number of values that you have. And it spits it out as a percentage, okay? And then if we had enabled this in the grade book, the letter grade equivalent will also show. So what does this look like when we talk about the anatomy? What might this look like? Using the same figure, it would look something like this. So the Caribbean Game Design Effectiveness Scale, that's the name of my scale. My values are emerging, developing, proficient, and exemplary. The description, remember the students don't see the description, but other teachers who would be using the system would see that. It evaluates students' ability to design educational games that effectively incorporate Caribbean cultural elements while meeting specific learning objectives. And then it is a custom scale. It's not one of the predefined ones. And I will be using this with my assignment, the second assignment, and the forum that is in the course. And the percentage and letter grades have been activated in the gradebook, which means that the equivalent will be showing up. Okay, so this is just a quick example of what that might look like. No, because our students don't see the description, it means that we have to think about how exactly, we have to be a little bit strategic and how exactly the students see the description. So there are several ways that we can do so. So we can share with the students before the assignments is due. So how do we do that? We can add it to our syllabus, or we can have it on the Moodle page. So we can put it in the course syllabus, or we can put it on the course outline, or we can put it on the Moodle page, and we can call it something like grading criteria or something. And so of course we would put exactly what the descriptions are. So we have the scale and what exactly each scale means. We can incorporate it as a standalone or in the activity in the feedback. So we can have something like a feedback guide, or within the activity itself, before the students see the activity, there's usually a description box. So we'll take a quick look at it. There's usually a description box, and there we can put in exactly what the different scales mean. And because we don't know where the students would fall, we would ensure that we put all the scale levels as well as the description. So we can upload it as a standalone, or we can put it as a part of the assignment description. We can embed the descriptions into the feedback that we give the students. So when we are grading the student's assignment, we would select whichever value it is, but in the feedback, we could actually write the description. So let's say the student gets proficient. We have in the feedback description, your analysis is logical, but adding more evidence would strengthen your argument. Something like that. So this would have been the description. We put it into the feedback. And then, of course, we add more to the feedback as much as possible. Try to combine the different feedback formats. So in addition to your verification, you may want to elaborate a little bit, or you want to be constructive, telling the student, giving that kind of constructive feedback to what specific areas need to be improved. And where possible, if you are able to include some form of reflection for the student to engage in using the metacognitive feedback structures, that would be ideal. And finally, if we have face-to-face classes, we can discuss it in our face-to-face class. Or if we have the students using the virtual learning environment, we can then upload a video and we could do a screencast. We did screencasts last week. We could do a screencast explaining what each is about. All right. So these are some of the things that we need to think about. Because the students don't see the description, we need to ensure that this information is shared with them. All right. Now, when we are going to create our scales, there are some things that we need to think about, all right? And one of the first things is that we need to think about the assessment, the activity that we are applying a scale to. We need to think about an appropriate scale name and think about the different values, okay? Remember, the levels are what we're referring to as the values. And then, of course, we need to define, clearly articulate the descriptions. So we need to describe what emerging looks like, what proficient looks like, what exemplary looks like. And then we ensure that there are no overlaps. So it must be clear that proficient is different from outstanding work. Okay. And then when we do all of this, when we're crafting this, we need to think about how exactly does this align to the learning outcomes that I have. All right. So one of the things that I have that I'd like to share with you as well is a sample. So let me just share this sample with you. All right. So here is the name of my course. And again, my course is a fictitious course. The assessment is a final assessment. It's a project where they have to create a digital educational game. And these are the learning outcomes and the skills that are applicable to this project would be, the application of these game design principles, the cultural integration, and so forth. So these are the key knowledge and skills that would apply. And then, of course, my scale name. I have my name, the name of my scale, digital educational game. Of course, I could call it something else, but ensure that it is something that is linked to your assignment. And I have 4 levels. So this is 2. It really is 4. So I have 4 scale levels: emerging, developing, proficient, and exemplary. And then I have my description. So emerging says that there is a basic attempt. So you notice that for each of my levels, my values, I have a description that shows a clear distinction between emerging and developing and proficient and exemplary. All right. So I just wanted to share that so you see what it is. And I usually like the idea of working through first on paper before I actually get into the creation aspect of it. So this is what I would encourage you to do. Craft this kind of information before. All right. Now what we're going to do next is that we're going to jump over into the virtual learning environment, and we're going to walk through the steps of how to create our scale. And we're going to look at it from the teacher's perspective, the student's perspective, and what it looks like in the grade book. So let us just jump over to do that. All right, so here I am in my course on the Moodle platform, Game-Based Learning in the Caribbean. Please remember that this is a fictitious game. One of the things that I'm going to do is that I am going to create my scale first. Okay, so I have my editing turned on, but it doesn't really matter for this. I click on grades, and then where it says grades, I'm going to click the drop down arrow here by user report, and I'm going to scroll down to where it says more and scales. So I'm going to click on scales. When that opens, you'll see your custom scales if you have any, and I had created one. So you notice that it is here, and it says that I have used it and I can edit it, okay? The standard scales that we spoke about earlier are below. So these are the scales that come with the Moodle system. And here on the Mono campus, these scales have been activated, all right? So we have separate and connected ways of knowing, the default competence scale that I spoke about, the one that I mentioned that's in Spanish, and then there is completed, not completed, satisfactory, and they have repeated separate and connected ways of knowing. I'm not sure why it is repeated, but that's fine. You have your standard scales here, your custom scales here. Now, because we're going to create one which is new, what we are going to do is that we're going to click on add a new scale, and then we will set up the particulars. All right. So I am going to click on add a new scale, and here I'm expected to put the name of my scale. All right. So I'm going to put the scale, the name of my scale right here. All right. And then where it says scale, this is where I'm going to put the values. Remember, we start from the low end to the highest, and we separate them with a comma. All right, so I have put that there. Now, the description. Remember that the description is not compulsory, but it is good for you to put it so that the other teachers can know exactly what the scales are. All right, so I am just going to put my scales in, the description of my scales in for each of the values. All right, so there we go. I'm just tidying this up a little bit. So when other teachers who are using the scales, whether the scales are in this course or in another course, if you have set it up so that it can be used right across the different courses, this is what the teachers will see. So right here where it says standard scale, you can tick, but it seems to have been turned off by MIT. But you can tick in here if you wanted to apply it right across. So if you click the little question mark, it brings up something. It's available site-wide, which means that in all the courses that are on the VLE, this particular scale would be available. All right. So when you're finished and you double check and you make sure everything is all right, you click Save Changes, and that's it. Your scale has been created. How easy was that? And then when you look under custom scales, you will see the name of it. So it is right here. It has not been used as yet. That's why it says no. You can edit, you can go back in and edit, or you can delete it. But we're not doing that. We set it up for a particular reason. Now I'm going back to my course where I can set up my assignment. All right, so I've set up my scale first. Now I'm going to set up my assignment. So I go to the section where I want to set up my assignment. I make sure that editing is turned on. I'm going to set up an assignment for the student to upload something. So I'll click on add an activity or resource. And here I have my starred. So I'll click on activities to get everything and click on assignment. Okay. So the first thing that I would do here is that I would put in the section where it says assignment name, I would put the name of the assignment. All right, so the assignment, I'm going to put game character design. Okay, so that is the name of the assignment. And then where it says description, this is where I will put the details of the assignment. All right, so here I have I'm putting the details of the assignment. The student is supposed to design a colorful wizard character, which can be used in that particular game. And I put that the assignment should be submitted. Maybe I should put this in bold as a JPEG or a PNG file and a brief description. Okay, so I have that. But remember when we had spoken earlier, we had said that we should share the description with the students. And this is a good place. So we could do it as a standalone where we upload it as a file, or we could incorporate it in the assignment. I am going to incorporate it in the assignment so the student sees it when he or she is reading the assignment. All right, so I'm just going to put a little thing that says, this is how your assignment will be assessed. All right, and then I'll probably put it in a different color so that it stands out for the student. So let me put it in a pretty blue. Ooh. Let me change that a little bit. It's a little bit jarring on the eyes. So I'm just going to make it a little deeper. That is much better. All right. So I'm happy with this. My student can see this when looking at what the assignment requires. I'm just doing a little bit of tidying up here so that it looks better. All right, so my values are there. I point out what the student is going to be graded on. All right, and then the activity instructions would repeat what exactly you want the student to do. So I am just going to copy this part and put here so that it's clear to the student what the student should do. I'm going to remove the specific details because those are already in the assignment. And then I'm just going to put that on. All right, so these are the 3 things that the student is expected to do. And of course, if you click the question mark, it would tell you the actions you would like the student to complete for this assignment. All right. So I have done that. There are no files that I am uploading. I do the usual thing. When is it available? When it's due? It's going to be due the 2nd. So I leave it at that. And then I can put in a reminder for me to grade, but I don't have to. And submission type, what will the student submit? It's a file that the student is going to be uploaded. So I'll leave the file submission as ticked, and then maximum number of uploaded files. Let me put 2 to be on the safe side. And the maximum submission, I can leave that as it is, or I can put a cap. No single image should be larger than 10 megs. And the feedback types, what kind of feedback am I going to give the student? So I can leave it at feedback comments and maybe a feedback file. I will decide. And so I will just go through and set up the rest of the parameters. All right, and I'm not doing group. Yes, the student can be notified, and this is where we will pay attention to the scales. So normally, if it's point, you'd have a numerical value, but we're using scale. So when we click scale, it gives us the default, but we need to click the drop down to find ours. So there it is, educational game character design scale. I click on that and I leave that. All right, the grading method can remain the same. The grade category, I will probably put this under assignments and no anonymous submissions. The rest I think can remain the same. So I can either save and return to course or save and display. If I save and display, it shows me what has been set up here, and then I can view and grade. All right, so I am done. I have set up my scales. I have set up my assignment for scaling. So what I'm going to do now is that I am going to view it as a student so that I can submit the assignment, and then I will grade it so that we can see how that works. So let me do that very quickly. I'm gonna switch role to student, all right? And then now that I'm in student mode, I see the information. So this is what the student would see when it is due, what is expected, okay? How the student will be marked. All of that is there. And then the student can add submission. So here it requires me to upload a file, and it had said that I should upload the file as a PNG or as a JPEG. So I have my file and I'll just upload it. Remember that you can drag and drop, all right? And then I click on save changes. The information is there. I can, as the student would be able to edit or submit. So now I can click submit. I am happy with what I have there and I need to confirm. So because I had selected that as teacher, these are there for the student. Okay, so the student has submitted. Well, the student in this case is Allison. That's me. So I have submitted the assignment. All right. So now I will switch. Of course, if you have actual students, it means that you wouldn't have to go through the process of switching, but it's good for you to see what it looks like for the student. So here I am in teacher mode, and let me go to the course. Okay, this is the assignment that was set up. When I click on the assignment, I realize that I have something that I can grade, and one student has submitted. So I can view all the submissions or I can grade the submissions. I'm gonna grade it. All right, so please note that the assignment comes up here and I can view the assignment and look at it. It says that it's not graded as yet, so here I will grade it. When I click the drop down, here you see the different values that we had set up in our scales. So I think this is very proficient. And then I am going to give Allison feedback on what she has done so that she can see that. So I will put Allison's feedback right here so that she can see the information. All right. And then when I am finished with that, I save this so Allison can have access to it. I don't have any feedback files. I'm just double checking to make sure that I have everything put in place. And I'm happy. And then I save my changes. Right? And it tells you that you have saved the changes and all this. All right. So what did that say? Let's do that again. Changes were saved. All right, so I am good. I can go back to the course. That's fine. All right, so if you get a message like that, just double check to make sure the work is okay. Now, as student, I'm going to go back into student role. So I switch back to see what the student would see. So here the student can do one of two things. If the student clicks on the assignment, the student will see that feedback has been given. Okay. And so, and if if you figure that your students won't know this and will just go straight to the gradebook, you can tell them, click on the assignment, they'll see the information. Here I see a plus sign. So if I click on the plus sign, it brings up the details. And you notice that my feedback is not just verification. So even though I am using the scale, which says that the student is proficient, I also have detailed feedback, which includes verification. It has strategic, it has reflective, and it has elaborative. So I have a number of formats combined in my assignment. So this is what the student sees. The other thing that the student could do is on the main page, if the student clicks on grades, it carries the student here, and then the student would see the assignment. So here it is, game character design, says that it's proficient. Now, because the percentage and the letter grades have been activated in my report, it also gives the percentage equivalent. Remember, we spoke about that earlier, and it also gives the letter grade. And if you have set it so the feedback shows, the student will also see the feedback here. All right. So essentially, that is it. That is how we put together the scale. That's how we create the scale. And then that's how we create the assignment and align the scale to the assignment, ensuring that we add the description so the student has access to the description, and also that we give the feedback, qualitative feedback that marries different feedback qualities. Now let us see if we can wrap this up. Okay, great. So now that we have seen how we can set it up, just a few reminders, you need to think about the assessments in your course. Is this an assessment that you can use a scale with easily? If so, I encourage you to do so. Consider how your scale aligns with your learning outcomes. So you think about that constructive alignment when you go through. Keep your scale values to between 3 and 5 levels, because too many levels will create confusion, grading inconsistencies, and so forth. And if we have too few levels, then it doesn't provide enough distinction. We should try to write the distinctions out, write our scale levels or descriptions out before we implement them. And while we are writing, let us try to focus on the behaviors, the observable behaviors, rather than on subjective judgments. Include what is present and what may be missing at each level. Use parallel structure right across all your descriptions, and connect your descriptions directly to your learning outcomes. Okay. Be consistent in using your scales in your different activities, and as much as possible, collect feedback from your students. Find out from them how they felt about it, whether or not it helped them, and get that kind of feedback so that you can know how to improve, or whether or not you probably need not to use it with this particular class. When you're doing your values and your descriptions, as much as is humanly possible, avoid vague terms. So what does average mean? You probably want to use meets expectations, okay? So think about the terms that you're going to use and ensure that they're not very vague. You need to ensure that they're specific, because you want to get this information across to the students. Use consistent language patterns across all the levels. So you would have seen from the example that I gave earlier, if you're describing emerging patterns and you have looked at 3 or 4 elements, ensure that you do the same for the proficient level, for the other levels, okay? So ensure that you use consistent language patterns across the levels, and try as much as possible not to rely too much on the negative terms at the lower end. So things like unacceptable, poor, harsh, as much as is possible, try to avoid using them. You don't want the students to meet with that in all of your scales: unacceptable, poor, not ready. Consider using developmental language. So emerging, developing, proficient, terms like that. And I know that different disciplines may have different terminology. So as much as possible, use the terms that are applicable to your discipline. Share these descriptions with your students so that they are aware beforehand of what it is that is expected of them, what the descriptions are. And it is a general good practice just to share with the students how they will be assessed. Combined feedback. So when you're giving your feedback, this is in your description. Ensure that you, as much as possible, include different feedback formats. And of course, you have to test it. So before you roll it out with your students, test a sample, test it with a pilot, little pilot group with 2 or 3 students go beyond student, viewing it as a student, but test it to ensure that it works and that it works well. And if you need to tweak, you do your tweaking. And remember that if your grade book, if the percentages and the letter grade, if that is activated in your grade book, your feedback scale will have a numerical equivalent and a letter grade equivalent. All right. So as usual, I just want to encourage you to explore scales. It's a beautiful little tool to use, and it's relatively easy to set up, as you can see. Consider whether or not you want to use this. So think about your activities, think about your learning outcomes, and think about whether or not this particular school tool would make it useful, would engage your students. As usual, don't be too hard on yourself. Start with one activity, start small, start with one activity, start with one scale, and test it out. See how your students react to it. See how you feel about it. Collect data if there's data to collect so that you can write a paper or do a presentation on it. But whatever you do, explore the tool, have fun, and I will see you again for the next session. My name is Michelle Stewart-McKoy from the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning, and I'll see you for the next session.